What's up and welcome to the episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we're talking about shunt modding and performance you can get when modding. Oh my god. Today we're talking about 175 watt RTX 5090 versus 250 watt RTX 5090. Are you ready to see benchmarks from the world's fastest gaming laptop? Pretty much as far as I know. And we're gonna talk about shunt modding today. I mean, that's predominantly what we're talking about. And all of this data has convinced me that Nvidia should increase the GPU wattage up to 250 watts for an RTX 5090 if the laptop is engineered electrically and thermally to handle that much wattage. The other thing that you should know is that there are definitely already laptops that are doing more than 175 watts, and you just did not know that it was doing more than 175 watts. I did not know that it was doing more than 175 watts, but it's just, it just happens to be 10% faster. Don't know why. It says it's 175 watts. It's not actually 175 watts. It's actually more like maybe 200 watts. We got a lot of stuff to cover, so let's dive into it. What is shunt modding? This is a resistor on the Legion Pro 7i 2025 version. And I've got a few different examples here to go over, but let's just talk shunt modding explained to like a 5th grade level, right? Shunt mod means tricking the Nvidia GPU into using extra watts to give you more performance beyond the 175 watt limit. This can be done a bunch of different ways. And typically, what I've seen shunt modders go up to is about 250 watts at the most. Now, to do a shunt mod, it requires soldering skills, it requires electrical know-how to know what resistor needs to be replaced with what, and then it also requires software manipulation. So if you don't adjust the power curve, it just doesn't give you that much extra performance. So let's just talk specs. Why are people actually shunt modding their laptops? Well, since 2023, when the RTX 4090 came out, there is a huge amount of difference between what these laptop GPUs are capable of in the RTX 4090, 5080, and 5090 versus what we actually get in the laptop itself. At 175 watts, we're not really capitalizing on the full performance of the laptop. So what do I mean by this? For example, a desktop RTX 5080 over here on the left has 10,752 CUDA cores. RTX 5090 has 10,496 CUDA cores, so it's like 97% of the CUDA cores, only missing 256 of them. And then the RTX 5080 has 8,192. But the key thing here is they're all running the same GB203 Blackwell chip, which means that it's essentially a similar silicon. Potentially, maybe the 5080 didn't have all of the sectors of the GPU activated. Maybe it wasn't binned quite as well, and that's why it went down to a 5080. The ones that bin better become 5090 laptop GPUs, and the ones that bin perfectly become desktop 5080 GPUs. That's just one potential example. Essentially, it's the same chip, and the desktop GPU here, they've been running at 325 watts as a base level, at least that much wattage. 340 watts is common, and when you're overclocking these desktop 5080 chips, it can go up to over 400 watts pretty easily. So let's take a brief look at some performance numbers. So this is the RTX 5090. These benchmarks were sourced, of course, from me, but also from Prema. Those shunt modded ones were sourced from Prema, Jarrod's Tech, NotebookCheck, and Reddit. So there's a variety of sources here, but let's start at the bottom. You can see many different laptops scoring around 23 to 24,000 with no laptop, to the best of my knowledge, even with OC going over 25,000. Now there's probably some out there, but the Legion Pro 7i and the Razer Blade 18 both score in the 26 to 27,000 range, which to me indicates that they probably have some form of shunt mod activated in the background. Both are using more than 175 watts because when you're using 175 watts, you pretty much can't go over 25,000 even with an overclock, or maybe just a little bit. But to go stock, completely stock, 467, this was from Jarrod's Tech. He did this test for me specifically. I know this test is reliable, and this is simply like 2,000 points higher than the average test, which is going to be closer to 24,000 on average. Got a SCAR 18 that is pretty clearly using more than 175 watts because this SCAR 18 is doing 30,128. That's a crazy score, obviously, for a laptop. NotebookCheck clocks the desktop RTX 5080, again, the same GB203 chip at 32,318 on average. So that means that there's scores that are going to be higher than 32,000 and scores that are going to be lower than 32,000, but on average, 32,318. Prema shunt modded the Eluktronics Hydroc 16G2 and got 33,056, and this is with a maximum overclock and undervolt applied. I don't know exactly how much most RTX 5090s could go, but I'm guessing probably 31, 32K without too much optimization. Yeah, it's pretty freaking crazy how powerful the RTX 5090 gets in a laptop when it's given 250 watts. I want to backtrack just a moment and just go through a shunt mod example. SCAR 17 2023 RTX 4090 with a Ryzen 9 7945HX Dragon Range CPU. And you can see that the stock RTX 4090 is going to get about 22,000. So he's managed to go up 2,600 points by shunt modding this laptop. But this is not optimized yet. And this is the benchmark after optimizing, 27,049 with a total score of 24,062. But this is the important one, 27,049. And when we jump back over here, you can see that this RTX 4090 SCAR 17 actually crushes all the RTX 5090 laptops that are stock that are not shunt modded. The only ones that are beating his SCAR 17 is the ones that I believe are using more than 175 watts. So that is very, very interesting to me. Now let's talk about how he actually did this. In the forum post here, he goes through all of his steps. First of all, he respreads his liquid metal, and then he also replaces his thermal putty with Eluktronics U6 Pro. I don't know how to say that, but basically it's an improved thermal putty. It's a kitty cat. I just gotta understand, a kitty cat is gonna make noise sometime. Yes. I love you. Let's see if you can help me out here, okay? What else did he do to this laptop to get these crazy scores? Well, he shunt modded this resistor right here. It actually took shunt modding only one resistor to get these scores. And now here's a measurement of his power draw on his laptop now after shunt modding. 436.5 watts is insane. And he's still using the default stock Chicone power adapter to run this. He says that it's fine, and he has been using this shunt modded SCAR 17 now for 2 years, and he has been running 24/7 AI workloads, as well as gaming on it regularly. And so that's 2 years of running at this 250 watt shunt mod level. Pretty much this is the fastest RTX 4090 laptop that I'm aware of. It's a perfect segue to the giveaway. I'm actually giving away the exact same laptop that Seanwee shunt modded. So I mean, if you wanted to shunt mod this, you basically already know how, whoever wins this. You'll need to follow the prompts in the gleam.io to be able to enter the giveaway, which is located right here and linked in the description down below. You need to be based in the United States. You need to provide a W-9 if you do win the laptop. And if you are selected, you'll have 48 hours to respond with your shipping address and signed W-9. Now this giveaway is in collaboration with Asus, so big shout out and thank you to them. Let me know in the comments down below if this giveaway is awesome. I think it is. Anyway, let's talk shunt modding pros and cons. Cons, of course, is the shunt mod will generate more electricity, which of course electricity will mean more heat, which means you're going to need even better cooling. The proper motherboard electrical design is very important when you're trying to go from 175 watts to 250 watts. Now, most laptops do provide, extra thermal headroom and electrical headroom. If you want to reliably go to a 250 watt shunt mod GPU, you're gonna need a nice motherboard design, as well as probably gonna need to modify your laptop to improve the thermal cooling capacity. This is the test unit that we're using for today's 175 watt versus 250 watt test, and this is courtesy of Prema, and this is a specially tuned Hydroc 16G2 from him. Now, the Prema mod, which you can see here at the bottom, it basically allows you to have an improved BIOS capability, allowing XMP profiles, undervolting of different kinds, and potentially raising the total power limit for like the Intel 275HX up to 250 watts. The stock Intel power limit is usually 210 watts at the most, but with this one you can actually go to 250. Now, the one we're using to test on this system is the Black Liquid Propulsion G2 external water cooler, but you theoretically could use an even beefier water cooling unit. You just have to replace the nozzle that it connects to the laptop. For RAM speed, we have a 24 gig Manix DDR5 7200 mega transfer memory with a QHD plus 300 Hz 1000 nits mini LED display, Intel BE200 Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4, weighs 5.58 pounds. So, Nvidia largely, I think, doesn't want to increase the power limit because they don't want laptops to get super thick and like 13, 14 pound monster laptops like they used to be 10 years ago. But this laptop is proof that you do not need to go that thick to be able to go to 250 watts if you're using an external water cooler. So needless to say, you've got a higher power limit CPU on here, a higher power limit on the RTX 5090. But the sad thing to me is that we don't have the 9955HX3D for our test unit because as we saw in my recent testing, the 9955HX3D versus the Intel 275HX, we get much faster performance. Overall, today's test, I think, gives us a good idea of what a 250 watt RTX 5090 can do. But if we had a 9955HX3D, I'm anticipating, I don't know, 4, 5, 6% faster potentially with the HX3D. So let's talk thermals. 250 watts versus 175 watts versus 225 watts, 20 runs in a row in Steel Nomad on a stress test. This is shunted versus stock temperatures from Prema. The 175 watt is getting 58 degrees with the water cooler after 20 runs. That's the average temperature. The 5090 225 watt going up to 225 watt only increases the temperature by 4 degrees here. And going up to 250 watt only increase the temperature by 7 degrees. When you're actually engaging the CPU more heavily in some of these other games, the GPU temperature also goes up a little bit more. That's not the only thermal test we did. We have some more thermal tests coming up. The Steel Nomad RTX 5090 laptop versus desktop 5080. Let's talk about this performance, very interesting. The stock 175 watt gets 5,192 for a 5080. You've got a 5090 jumping up to 6404. That's a pretty sizable increase going to the 5090, though this is the tuned Hydroc versus this is a SCAR 18 5080, so already kind of doesn't have the same memory tuning. Not exactly a like for like comparison, but gives you an idea of the difference between a 5080 and a 5090. 225 watt getting 6900, 250 watt stock 7100. So you're not getting too much extra performance unless you actually optimize your clock speed, because the stock curve for RTX 5090 is designed for 175 watts. If you actually want to get realistic performance gains at 250 watts, you need to raise this power curve a lot, like 300 to 400 hertz on the clock speed. And when we actually look at the Steel Nomad clock speed here, you can see this difference. Average clock frequency 2039. At 225 watts, we're doing 2,193. At 250 watts, only 2215. Now, when you jump up to 250 watts with a max overclock and undervolt, we're going up over 500 hertz increase, about 550 hertz increase here to the average clock frequency to the GPU. And this is even lower than what a desktop 5080 would get when you go from 175 to 225 to 250, but the real performance gain will only be had if you also increase the overall curve. So that way you target higher clock speeds, because you can actually run those higher clock speeds consistently and stably because you have more electricity going through the GPU. Now, when you look at the RTX 5080, it's also very interesting for the laptop side of things, because this one actually has a lot of overclocking headroom as well, going from 2280 with a slight overclock going all the way up to 28,585. And this is again with a max overclock and undervolt, so record-setting performance from an RTX 5080 laptop GPU. So this is a performance versus power graph for the RTX 5090 laptop and 5080 laptop. We have real values mixed with my estimated values, and these are obviously subject to change. But you can see that the real max undervolt and overclock got 33,056, and he's actually scored 33,500 now. So I don't know if this estimate should be raised a little bit, but basically if you're accounting for the silicon lottery and trying to ensure that all of the different chips can run that wattage and clock speed safely and consistently, you usually would want to lower the clock speed down just a little bit. So that's what this estimated line is. I could, of course, have drawn it straight from here to here, but I don't think that's realistic because this 24,300 and 2280. These are real values tested with like the SCAR 17 or what you'd expect in a typical 175 watt chassis. So if you're estimating from there to what another stock chassis with just more power wattage and an appropriate clock speed would be, I'm guessing it's 31.5. This could be off, but that's my best guess. So, and for an RTX 5080, the score is 28,500. I'm gonna go down 1,000 points and say 27,500 is what most RTX 5080s could get when given unlimited power. Now, if you do, extrapolate this out, then, an RTX 5080 becomes more powerful than an RTX 5090 when given the 225 watts. But if it's only given 200 watts, then it's going to be pretty dang close to an RTX 5090. So it's just a little bit low, but it might be scoring better or worse than some actual 5090 laptops. Now, the last two results down here also are not quite to graph scale because they're at the 80 watt and 95. And this is not technically a plotter chart, but all these other from 125 on are appropriate and to scale. It does scale quite well, all the way from 80 watts all the way up to 250 watts. We're getting more and more performance the more power we put into the GPU. Now the 5090, of course, does scale a little bit better at the full wattage performance levels. Let's get into some performance benchmarks. This is Black Myth Wukong. 175 watt stocks giving us 90 FPS on average. This is cinematic, very high ray tracing quality, so basically max settings that you can get in the game. 96 FPS when you go to 250 watts, so you only get 6.7%, but that's again because we don't have the correct clock speeds being targeted for the 250 watt power level. So going up to 250 watts with the adjusted clock speeds gave us 23.3% faster, and this is not a max clock. This is like a stable, consistent clock speed that Prema set, which is a little bit less aggressive than what he had set on the 3D Mark, Time Spy, and Steel Nomad scores. So let's talk Cyberpunk 2077, 175 watts giving us 136 FPS, 250 watt stock giving us 154 FPS, which is a nice jump considering we didn't even adjust the clock speeds. After adjusting the clock speed, getting up to 21.7% faster at 166 FPS. Hogwarts Legacy, 175 watts. Keep in mind, this is a fairly CPU-bound game, especially when you're in Hogsmeade, which is where Prema tested this at. Stock, we're going 190 FPS, 123 for our 1% lows. In 250 watts, we're looking at 207 FPS, 151 for our 1% lows. And the key thing here, look at this thermal jump going from 55 to 76 on the GPU. Now, after applying a slight undervolt to the score, as well as increasing the clock speed at the same time, Prema got the temps to drop from 76 down all the way to 64. This thermal test was done by waiting 10 minutes at one spot in Hogwarts, right at the fireworks stand, and letting the laptop thermally soak with the water cooler attached. So this is a 250 watt laptop GPU running at 64 degrees at a consistent gameplay level. Now, I don't know that we're actually fully utilizing the GPU at 250 watts, but that's what we're targeting if everything was not CPU bound. We're definitely being CPU bound a little bit, because you can see we're only reaching 91% GPU utilization, but it's much better than the stock 76% GPU utilization or the 87% without the adjusted overclock. Now, notice that he also is applying an overclock to the RAM speed. So looking at this GPU clocks here as well, we're looking at 2445 for our GPU clock, 2700 for 250 watt stock, and 2880, which is crazy good, for the 250 watt optimized or adjusted power curve. CPU temps as well are also better after undervolting the GPU. So less heat in the GPU also translates to less heat in the CPU. The power level on the GPU is not going to read correctly given the Shunt mod. Rainbow Six Siege, a esports game, 175 watts stock, gave us 333 FPS. When you add the 250 watts, you're going up to 383 FPS. Nice performance gain, even though we haven't adjusted the curve yet, going up all the way to 401 FPS. This is done with the benchmark, so we don't have the overlay. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a very CPU-bound game, even at QHD. As you can see here, 175 watts stock gave us 207 FPS. 250 watts barely gave us a performance increase, only 2.4% faster. And with the adjusted curve, only 3.9% faster. Now, with CPU and memory tuning, he got up to 224 FPS. So CPU tuning actually gave us just as much gain as jumping 75 watts up in the GPU power. So if you're playing CPU-bound games, increasing the GPU power, it's not going to really benefit you that much. No surprise there. Witcher 3, another thermal test, 10 minutes, 56 degrees on the GPU, 68 on the CPU, 148 FPS on average, 130 for our 1% low. So jumping up to 250, we went up only 7 degrees here, which is really, really good. Now, when we're being GPU bound, increasing the clock speed also increased our temperature, going from 63 up to 69. So the total difference here is only 13 degrees Celsius. And again, these are 10-minute heat soak tests. I do think these numbers are valid to the best of my knowledge. And the performance gain here in The Witcher 3 is also epic. 148 FPS jumping up all the way to 192 FPS. That's 29% faster while only being 23% warmer. Only 69 degrees on the GPU. So again, why NVIDIA? Why can't we run a laptop GPU at 250 watts? And I think it's extremely realistic, especially in the water-cooled chassis, and especially if the motherboard was electrically designed to handle it. Now, when you graph all these game benchmarks out, total average FPS gain going from 184 FPS on average to 217 FPS on average. Steel Nomad with our biggest overall performance difference at 41%. I would attribute this to being partially because Steel Nomad is going to be very, very GPU bound, very little CPU bounding in Steel Nomad, no ray tracing in Steel Nomad. In addition, we're talking about reaching the max potential overclock and undervolt in Steel Nomad versus the stock 175 watts. So this is the only one where that's really the case. These other benchmarks are done with a more realistic optimization to the power curve. This is also a lot of subject to change, right? Like if NVIDIA does not tune it as aggressively as Prema, we might see a little bit less performance gain at 250 watts. But if NVIDIA thinks, oh, we can tune it a little bit more than what Prema did, then it might actually go a little bit beyond what Prema's benchmarks here show us. So on average, we got 18.1% improved performance, and GPU-bound game averages only got 23.41% performance improvement. So I would say on average, you're going to expect over a 20% improvement to your performance if you went from 175 watts to 250 watts and you're playing a GPU bound game. In Blender at 175 watts, we got 7976. At 250 watts without it being optimized, only 8022. And after getting an optimized power curve, we got 8850. So about a 10% improvement to the performance inside of Blender when you have the more powerful 250 watt GPU. XMG also gave a supporting statement basically saying, should NVIDIA choose to support the higher TGP targets with required technical backing, then XMG is fully prepared to implement them in future product generations. Given the fact that you can use a water cooler with these laptops, there's no reason why we can't go to 250 watts in these laptops, especially since the motherboard was electrically designed to handle at least more than 175. I don't know exactly how much more. Prema says that his Hydroc 16G2 is perfectly stable at 250 watts. No crashes, no instability problems, especially if he's not obviously pushing the GPU clock into crazy land. If he's pushing it to reasonable clock speed gains for how much power we're increasing, then he's seeing perfect stability. Why should NVIDIA increase the power limits on these various laptops? Well, first of all, desktop GPUs using the exact same silicon, though it might be binned a little differently, have been running at 325 watts safely for a long time. And laptops have wasted so much potential performance gains because of this difference in total power available to the GPU. Now, laptops don't even need to be thicker. Laptops have been secretly shunt modded now for years. We have, I don't want to mention specific names necessarily, at least 5 different laptop brands have secretly shunt modded their laptops to increase performance beyond the 175 watt cap. You didn't even know it. You just saw 10% more performance and you were grateful for it. And then these companies oftentimes got in trouble and had to revert the changes through a firmware update or nerf and neuter the laptop's performance in the next generation, which is just so silly when a previous gen RTX 4090 product almost matches the current gen 5090 product, even though there's a whole improvement to the GPU architecture and everything. One of the reasons why NVIDIA doesn't want to go to 250 watts is they don't want thicker laptops. And the simple fact is laptops don't need to be thicker. We can leverage external water coolers. We can use the improved thermal cooling solutions to at least push beyond 175. We can easily get to 200 watts on air cooling alone, probably 225 watts or maybe even 250 watts on air cooling alone in some of these laptops, the ones that are the best engineered, highest performance laptops like the Legion Pro 7i, the XMG, the Eluktronics, the MSI Titan and Raider series, the Alienware Area 51M18. A lot of these laptops, if given the opportunity, could definitely go beyond 175 watts. They might need some electrical design and improvements to get them to run stably, but they could definitely handle more than 175. How much more needs to be determined through actual testing, but this arbitrary cap of 175 watts needs to go. Like NVIDIA needs to raise the potential cap to like 225, 250 watts for the RTX 5090, maybe 200 or 225 watts for the RTX 5080. And I would recommend the 5070 Ti also going up to 175 watts. It's obviously important to have properly test these machines so that they're running safely and efficiently. If they have the cooling and electrical design to handle the wattage, then NVIDIA should let these companies push the wattage to higher levels. We've had all kinds of laptop cooling technology improvements. We've had external water coolers, which is probably the biggest improvement, but beyond that, VRMs have been improved. Smaller power adapter sizes have come about that use the same power adapter size while increasing the wattage. So we're going over 400 watts now in the power adapters, which means that we already have the power adapters available to us to go beyond 175 watts and stay well within the safe limits of our power adapters. In addition, we've had motherboard electrical design improvements. So that means that the motherboards are able to handle more juice if they're designed to do that. And some of the motherboards obviously have been designed to handle that increased wattage because they've been running at more than 175 watts secretly. Now it's time for NVIDIA, I think, to officially let these companies run at more than 175 watts. So we've had improved thermal interface design. So this means that these materials like liquid metal and PTM 7950 are just better at aging and better at transferring heat away from the laptops. And basically all of the top laptops are either using the two-phase change PTM material or liquid metal at this point. You know, we've had more efficient heat fin design to dissipate that heat. We have more efficient fans that blow more air per RPM and are quieter than they used to be. But just in my discussions with other brands, they're all like, yeah, let's make a more powerful laptop. We would love to do that. But NVIDIA's like, no. If NVIDIA refuses to increase GPU wattage, then I believe they will eventually lose laptop customers to Apple and AMD. They're going to lose it to Apple because if they're going to compete at the lower wattage, thinner, lighter laptop space, NVIDIA is just not competing very well against Apple's ultra power efficient silicon because Apple's able to push a ton of performance in a very low total TDP package, and NVIDIA is nowhere even close to Apple's efficiency. And when it comes to AMD, AMD is very close to NVIDIA's power efficiency, but AMD just currently is not competing in the laptop space. And if AMD were instead to come out and say, let's put together a 250 watt Radeon 9070 XT into a laptop, that's totally 100% possible now. And they would absolutely crush a laptop RTX 5090 if this was ever done. I would advise AMD to pursue that. They should pursue a 250 watt laptop GPU design that will crush the 175 watt NVIDIA counterparts. So in summary, huge performance gains are possible with an RTX 5090 if going up to 250 watts. I believe this is a safe thing to do. Brands want to do it. Just NVIDIA is like the only one that's saying no. So if NVIDIA doesn't want to do this, I think they really should release some kind of an official statement and saying why they don't want to do this. NVIDIA has been playing the policeman against their own partners who are trying to make their products better. NVIDIA is making them backtrack and make their products worse, which is not good. I really hope that we get to see higher powered laptop GPUs, potentially even RTX 5000 series GPUs sometime in the future, because I know for sure some of the laptops are equipped to handle more than 175 watts already, and they're just being forced to turn it down to 175 watts, which is just a really sucky situation to be in, especially if you've over-engineered a product and then you're being forced to run it at lower speeds. It's just, that feels bad, man. Fundamentally, I'm saying the NVIDIA products are amazing and that they can be improved in a major way if NVIDIA will just loosen some of the restrictions and work with their partners to make them even better. I hope NVIDIA gets its head back into the game of making their laptops the most powerful laptops that they can be. So that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Brandon, out.